Dear President and honourable members, the European Union continues to be globally a frontrunner when it comes to the protection of children's rights. This is reflected in both our legal but also in our policy frameworks. The flagship legislation here is the Digital Services Act. This ensures a safety by default approach, a safer internet by setting very high standards for the protection and the empowerment of all minors online. And this is the strongest tool that we have in our arsenal. And we have shown, the Commission has shown, time and again, that it is not afraid to use it. Everyone can already see what real implementation looks like, from TikTok to Grok, and more recently with Meta. The Commission has acted swiftly and without hesitation. I would like here from this podium to thank our services in the Commission for their dedicated work, to thank my colleague, Executive Vice President Hanna Verkunen, for her strong and firm stance on this important file. This is what credibility looks like in practice, setting the rules and enforcing them. But the Commission is not stopping there. We understand that we have a duty and a responsibility to provide clarity on what the obligations in our laws mean, on what we expect. This is why the Commission has developed a blueprint for an age verification solution. This is based on the highest possible standards when it comes to privacy and to data protection. And yesterday, as a College of Commissioners, we adopted a recommendation that paves the way for this to be accessible to all European citizens on their devices. We are clearly laying down the actions that we expect from member states and we are defining an EU-wide governance. Moreover, the President has now convened a special panel on child safety online and on potential age restrictions. The panel brings together experts from the medical, tech, and education sectors. They are also joined by youth, by children, and by parent representatives. And they are currently assessing what more can be done at a European level. They are constantly in touch also with the European Parliament Intergroup on Children's Rights. And their recommendations will come before the summer. Because let's make no mistake, this is an issue that needs our urgent attention. With a quarter of children aged between 12 and 17 years of age, 25% of children in Europe experiencing cyberbullying, we have to act quickly. Behind each of these numbers is a person. Behind each of these numbers is a parent, a son, a daughter, and a precious life. So we cannot afford to hear more heartbreaking stories like the one of Coco, which this chamber heard about last month, and we need to act fast. So yes, the Commission agrees with you, honourable members, that cyberbullying is a serious threat to young people and to their well-being. This is why, as a college, we sent a strong message with the dedicated action plan on cyberbullying. Stronger together, safer online. We included therein, for the first time, a common understanding of cyberbullying, a definition. Because understanding creates awareness, and awareness helps to break stigma and to effectively address this issue. It is also important to remember that at EU level, cyberbullying does not exist in a legal vacuum. There are existing rules that already criminalize it when it involves hate speech, incitement of violence, or online abuse, notably under the Framework Decision on Racism and Xenophobia and the Directive on Violence Against Women. Beyond this, the action plan focuses on 3 pillars. First, protection. Here we make the full use of our existing legislation, but we also look at where we can better address cyberbullying in the future. This includes the upcoming review of the Digital Services Act guidelines under Article 28 and the ones on trusted flaggers. Similarly, we will consider cyberbullying during the ongoing evaluation of the Audiovisual Media Services Directive and its review. The second pillar is prevention. More digital literacy by teaming up with partners like Safer Internet Centers and the Better Internet for Kids platform. And finally, empowerment. It must be easier to report than to bully people online. We must break silence around cyberbullying, and reporting must make a difference. For the time being, this will be implemented using existing tools. Some measures will be implemented by the Commission, and for others, we will team up with Member States who can also do a lot. In addition, strengthening the child guarantee will also contribute to ensure that the protective, preventive, and empowering measures reach the most vulnerable children, making sure that every child feels safe, online as well as offline, with his or her rights and their dignity fully respected.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Now we are moving to the round of political groups, and the first one it will be Mr. Tobé, representing the EPP Group, for 2 minutes.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, colleagues. The EPP Group is committed to a simple but very important principle. What is illegal offline must be illegal online. This is not just common sense. It is a matter of justice. Yet, across Europe today, this is still not reflected in the law. Last month in this chamber, we listened to Jackie Fox from Ireland about the horrific impact of online abuse, which ultimately led to that her 20-year-old daughter, Nicole Coco Fox, took her own life. Unfortunately, her story is not an isolated tragedy. Cyberbullying is one of the most pressing online safety concerns of young people in Europe today. But Jackie Fox also showed us something else, that justice is possible. In Ireland, Coco's law has made severe online abuse a crime. It has closed a legal gap and provided victims with clearer protection. And this is the standard that we should uphold across our entire union, because protection and justice should not depend on where you live. It should be the rule across the union. That is why the EPP Group is calling on the Commission to start the work with a proposal to have a European Coco's law. We need a clear, strong, enforceable EU rules that criminalize severe online abuse. And finally, colleagues, it is unacceptable that since the start of this month, we lack a clear legal framework to stop the spread of child sexual abuse material online. Also here, we need an initiative from Commission and, of course, together in this House. Let there be no doubt. Abusers must be held to account, and let us stand on the side of victims. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Vice President Barley for 1.5 minutes, representing S&D Group.
Vielen Dank. Thank you. The internet does not forget. The many victims of cyberbullying and digital violence know that all too well. These people live in constant fear that humiliating moments will be repeatedly shown online and reach a nearly unlimited audience. Deep fakes make the problem even worse. 1 in 6 young people in Europe have experience of digital violence. 1 in 8 of them admit that they have already bullied other people online. And these are incredible figures. So what can we do? There are potential perpetrators who themselves may be very young. They need to understand the impact of what they're doing, and victims need to know how to protect themselves. Victims need easy access to reporting systems, reliable support, and support with mental health. In particular, for vulnerable groups, we must ensure that protection is in place. But the problem with cyberbullying cannot be resolved alone with individual approaches. The responsibility to deal with this cannot remain with young people. We must deal with the business model. Media literacy and digital education are important elements to ensure that in the long term we create safe online environments, but platforms should be forced to take responsibility. The health and safety of young people must become before the profit and greed of tech giants. With violent, pornographic, shocking and dangerous content, they are trying to make a profit. The DSA forces them to provide a better level of privacy and protection for minors. In order to achieve this, the Commission has set out clear guidelines. This includes that there should be child-appropriate adjustment to algorithms, effective moderation around the clock, warnings, references, helplines, restrictions on comments, a complaints procedure for children, and swift and effective deletion of inappropriate content. Unsurprisingly, however, the platforms have not taken up these recommendations, and that is why we need to step up the pressure. Our standards are not just a request or a friendly warning, they are an obligation if you want to work on the European market, and we demand them.
Speaker is Mr. Joch for 1 minute, Patriots Group.
Děkuji za slovo.
Thank you very much for the floor. Dear colleagues, cyberbullying is not a fringe problem. It's a systematic failure of our environment online. Children and adults often face attacks which have no real consequences for the perpetrators. According to polls, every 6th child has encountered some form of cyberbullying, and these are only the cases that we know of. If we are being serious, we need not only declarations, we need specific steps defining responsibility for online abuse, and we need an enforceable responsibility of large platforms. They earn their profits in Europe, but they don't feel responsible for what happens on their products, even though many people say that they were at some point in their lives witness of online abuse. But there is an uncomfortable truth. We are failing in education. Not even parents have the basic skills online. They often leave their children unsupervised on WhatsApp or other chat platforms where they can chat in closed groups without any supervision whatsoever. According to Eurobarometer, 40% of grown-ups feel they do not have sufficient knowledge to supervise their children online. If we don't consolidate the law, education and responsibility, we will never deal with these problems. This is not about regulating the internet, this is about protecting the weakest among us.
Grazie, onorevole. Prego, onorevole. Thank you very much. Mr. Cavadagna.
Presidente, un ragazzo.
Madam President, 1 out of 6 children has been the victim of cyberbullying. Cyberbullying is the main reason why people phone the relevant centres that we call blue numbers in Italy. These aren't abstract numbers. They are real lives, real children who aren't getting help online or offline. This is a serious problem, and we must tackle it head on in a serious manner. We have to fight against this phenomenon, which knows no borders, but we shouldn't fight against it with new directives and more bureaucracy. Let us make sure that we implement and enforce legislation that we have. Yes, platforms should shoulder responsibility, but there should also be parental controls, and parents should play their role. Italy has already shown the way with the Law 70/2024 and Decree 99/2025. Thanks to all of this, Meloni has set up a comprehensive system. Parents and teachers also have to be put in a position where they can play their role. It shouldn't be about ideology, because sometimes this is what happens in this House. Thank you very much. Mrs. Sifrova-Ostrihonova.
They bully and they are bullied. 1 in 6 teenagers experiences online bullying. This is the reality of the internet, that we know today. I often hear that the internet is a free space. Well, it is not. It is a space where algorithms reward hate. The more you attack someone, the more likes you get. Group chats where men encourage one another to drug and assault women and exchange tips how to get away with that. A pro-government extremist who spreads hateful speech, and colleagues even here among us who normalize this behavior. And yet we leave everyone to navigate this space on their own. And that is not fair. It is our responsibility here to set the rules, especially for children. Cyberbullying must be a criminal offense across the European Union. And I don't know about those sitting in the far end of this chamber, but I refuse to live in a Europe where the loudest voice is the one that intimidates the most. Thank you.
Grazie, onorevole. Prego. Thank you very much. Mrs. Gregorova is next.
Dear colleagues, mostly from EPP, as you initiated this resolution, if you truly want to tackle cyberbullying, let me give you one piece of advice. Call your fellow party member, Ursula von der Leyen, and tell her to enforce the DSA properly. Tell her that we need to have social media with safety by design, where safety comes before profit, and where our values are reflected in platforms' algorithms. Tell her that age verification and banning minors from social media is not the solution to all of our problems. But most of all, remind her that economic interests like Germany selling more cars to the US must not come before our safety when she negotiates with Trump. Call your numerous ministers across Europe and tell them this. Stop cutting funds for education and NGOs fighting against this issue. Enhance education, empower parents, and don't push back on banning nudifiers. And finally, don't spread hate. Make sure that women, the queer community, and everyone else feels safe and welcome in Europe. Thank you.
Grazie, onorevole. Prego, onorevole Serra. Thank you very much. Mrs. Serra Sanchez.
Presidenta. Thank you, President. Commissioner, the techno-oligarchs are doing business with online violence. I think you need to connect two realities. Firstly, a New Mexico jury in the US said that Meta should pay an enormous fine for hiding points that enable sexual exploitation of children. And then there has been another ruling, this time in Los Angeles, which again found Meta guilty of addictive design with Instagram. So what do these rulings tell you? They tell you that violence on digital platforms is no accident. It has to do with design. It's deliberate encouragement of violence. And secondly, you can go to a school where bullying takes place, any school where this takes place, and you know what you need: prevention, training, clear rules, protocols, ways to report, education to deal with machoism and racism, involvement of families, and above all, it's important that the school actually wants to deal with the bullying. And what is happening with digital platforms is that the response is to say that those who have ownership are not responsible. Actually, they just want to do business with violence, and there is no real social pressure. Instead, you have algorithms which actually fuel this violence and mean that these are not safe spaces, because Trump's friends do not want to face up to this. They actually just want to make profits, because cyberbullying is bullying, and the platforms are like schools where the bullies have taken charge. And so until we face up to the fact that those bullies are in control and they own the digital platforms, all that we do in the institutions will be a dead letter. What we need is clear rules to deal with violence. Thank you.
Grazie, onorevole. Prego, onorevole. Thank you very much. Mr. Bystrom. Prego.
Ja, liebe Kollegen,
Colleagues, the Digital Services Censorship Act is not enough. It hasn't fought against cyberbullying, and so now we have more restrictions. And once again, Soros NGOs are getting more competence, or should get more competence. Colleen Fernandez's case showed we had the usual suspected with hate aid involved in that. So what's this really about? It's about censoring the opposition. Let's just look at the fact. In Germany alone, in 2025, there are 40,000 reports for internet comments were made. And just this year, in February alone, on one day, 140 houses were searched. I mean, imagine that. That's the sort of intimidation that's going on because of what people say online. Robert Habeck, former minister, was called an idiot by a pensioner, and they then ended up being sentenced by a court. But he's actually just stating a fact.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lenars.
Thank you, Madam President. Last month, we sat in this chamber and we listened to Jackie Fox as she shared the story of her daughter, Coco, and how online bullies ultimately and tragically pushed her to suicide. A very powerful speech, and we rightfully gave her a standing ovation. Last week, I met another mother whose son took his own life after intimate messages of him were circulated online. Her grief is unimaginable, but what haunts her still today is this. No one can tell her with certainty that those images of her son are no longer circulating somewhere on the web today. And what if there would have been a simple button for her son to push to delete these images permanently? Perhaps Glenn would still be alive today. And this is the reality behind our legislative gaps. We rightfully celebrate here in this Parliament when we're successful in getting nudifying apps banned. But what good does it do if we fail to stop the harm they produce, if we can't even detect the material they produce? We cannot protect victims by tying the hands of those who could prevent abuse from spreading. Yes, the creators of such content are responsible. Those who share it are responsible. Those who enjoy it are responsible. But we must also be honest. If we fail to equip our systems to stop it, if we hesitate to close known legislative gaps, we too carry a share of that responsibility. We need proportionate voluntary detection of child sexual abuse material so that platforms and authorities can act before harm and abuse multiplies. We owe victims and their families more than standing ovations. We owe them action. Thank you.
Grazie, onorevole. Prego, onorevole. Thank you very much. Mrs. Inchir.
Commissioner, colleagues, while digital spaces offer connection and learning, children and youngsters are also exposed to serious risks as cyberbullying and harassment. Cyberbullying and harassment harms mental health, confidence and safety. Tackling it must be one of our central work. We already have some of the necessary tools. We have the DSA, the Digital Service Act, we have the AI Act and the General Data Protection Regulations set clear protections, but they must be fully enforced. Online platforms must take responsibility and face consequences if they refuse. We also need effective age verification system on online platforms with a clear minimum age to better protect minors from harmful content. With strategies like Better Internet for Kids, we have a direction. Now we need a stronger oversight, more transparency, and above all, more actions.
Grazie, onorevole. Prego, onorevole. Thank you very much. Mr. Stanek.
Paní předsedající, kolegyně.
Madam President, colleagues, the action plan for safer internet goes in the right direction. It protects children. It raises the issue of prevention and it implements coordination. But let's be frank, safe internet is not created in the institutions. It is created at home. No application, no strategy, no action plan will replace parents who take interest in their children, who know what they're doing online, who set limits. As patriots, we refuse the illusion that every failure can be resolved by another EU initiatives. Europe should help. It should not replace. It should support. It should not take over responsibility. Cyberbullying is a major issue, but its roots are not technological. They have to do with the environment, the society, the relationships. We have to strengthen the family. If we want to protect children, we have to start there. Thank you.
Mrs. Zaleska.
Pani Przewodnicząca,
President, Commissioner, yes, hate is a deadly serious issue, but it's difficult to talk about it in the Parliament when the Parliament has this firewall around groups and can't talk to its opponents. It's difficult to talk about this subject when hate is also coming from this pulpit here, where wokeism is promoted, where some members of particular political groups are creating memes that dehumanize and hold in contempt and basically stop us from having a serious debate about this. It's difficult for me as a Pole, where in my country our government says that there is a horde of, where they're running a horde of haters attacking their opponents. But we must do something. Of course we have to do something. The platforms have to be held accountable. Yes, we need education, and not just education of children, but also of parents, so that they can keep an eye on what their children are doing. Psychological support is necessary. Rapid reaction and capable provisions are required. But we don't want limitations of our freedom. We don't want more red tape, especially when that's not actually going to change anything.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Young-Courtin. Thank you very much, Madam President. Commissioner McAuliffe, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues have already said that 1 out of 6 teenagers is the victim of cyberbullying, and 1 out of 8 admits to have taken part in cyberbullying. And this is the main reason, cyberbullying is the main reason for contacting safer internet centers. And I'd like to ask you, how many more suicides and how much more self-harm are we going to allow before we do something about this? Cyberbullying is something urgent. It's an urgent health issue, and we need to speak to the platforms. We need penalties against them if they don't do what they should do. The DSA has to be implemented fully without with the temporary suspension of platforms that don't toe the line. And we should go further with harmonized digital majority. There's also a hotline in France, a cyberbullying hotline, 3018, and I think this is something that we should also do in other parts of Europe. Commissioner McAuliffe, I know you will rise to the occasion. Let's put an end to platform impunity. Our children's rights are non-negotiable.
Grazie, onorevole.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lagodinsky.
18% of all children, 1 in 6 children are victims of cyberbullying, and this is not normal. It may not become the new generational normalcy. We cannot accept this. How do we fix it? Well, not with quick fixes, but with structural solutions. What's the difference? Age verification or social media bans are quick fixes. They are not going into the real solution. And the real solution is the business model. How do we tackle that? By DSA. DSA implementation is what we need. We need to switch off recommender systems by default. We need to crack down on dark patterns. We need to mandate platforms to share their data with researchers. And what we need is a ban on nudifiers, something that this House has proposed and something that the EPP, together with some representatives of the Commission and with German government, have hijacked yesterday during the negotiations for AI Act Omnibus. And this is the unacceptable truth, and this truth has to be changed. We need a ban of nudifiers to combat CSAM.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Martins.
Obrigada, Sra. Presidente. Sr. Comissário.
Thank you, President. Commissioner. With the digital platforms, the real crime is the business model. Violence is fundamental to that model. 1 in 6 of our children have been victims of cyberbullying, and 1 in every 10 children have been on the receiving end of violence, insults, hate, or images shared without consent. We have cyberbullying in schools or cyberbullying directed against women. They're not the same, but they're both fed by these machines. The cultural breeding ground for all of this is the manosphere. And that is something that some of you in this chamber actually stand up for. So what we need is prevention. We need there to be real consequences for the real crimes which are destroying lives. Digital platforms cannot be some kind of legal offshore structure. The Digital Services Act should have real consequences, otherwise it's no point.
Thank you very much. Mr. Anadiotis. Madam President, Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, cyberbullying isn't just a mere digital phenomenon. It constitutes a genuine threat to dignity, privacy, and sometimes to the very lives of our citizens, especially young people and children. Nowadays in the EU, we're still going about our business without a common definition or without a single criminal framework. Perpetrators are hiding behind anonymity, and anonymity is a fundamental element of freedom on the internet, but it's turning into more of a shield of impunity. We cannot allow the protection of anonymity to crush victims' rights, the right to privacy, the protection of personal data, and safety. We mustn't ignore danger that is lurking there. How can we make sure that the necessary protection of victims will not lead us to curtailing freedom of expression? If we impose excessively harsh penalties on the platforms, will they not take down content en masse and preventively, even if it is legal content, just to cover their backs? That is why we have to be careful, because this could lead to self-censorship. So we need clear rules, balance, and accountability. Without freedom, we cannot have a safe digital environment, but we cannot have a safe digital environment without responsibility either. So we need a balanced approach, strong victim protection without breaching fundamental freedoms. What Europe needs to think about isn't safety or freedom, but safety and freedom. Thank you very much. Ms. Dupont.
Madam President, Commissioner, cyberbullying is a silent monster. It cuts social bonds, it undermines human interaction, it erodes trust in society, and it can ultimately, and we just heard the reminder of Coco's example here, put the life of children at risk. Contrary to their public humiliation in group chats, in social media forums, in gaming channels, effectively in real life, victims far too often suffer in silence because they feel not seen, they feel not taken seriously, that their interest and their vulnerability does not matter. For years now, reports and warning have been skyrocketing. By now, 1 in 6 children between the age of 11 and 15 in Europe alone states that they had been victim to cyberbullying. It's high time to end that. For that, we need a clear mixture of short, mid, and long-term instruments that we need to strengthen because they are already there, and new ones where we need to deploy the possibilities. Digital literacy and prevention, including all relevant actors, is important. Further support helplines and ease their usage across the EU is also very important. But we also need to assess the possibilities of streamlining EU's and member states' approaches, foster a common understanding and definition, and if needed, streamline criminal law. Ultimately, we need to strengthen law enforcement's capacity and possibility to react, and a plea to ourselves, let's not simply accept that there are legal gaps and put them forward as normal. Let's act on it. Thanks.
Grazie onorevole. Prego vicepresidente.
Mrs. Schaldemose, Vice President.
Cyberbullying is not just a word on a screen. It has real consequences for real children and young people. And we know the life on social media. Cyberbullying is just one of many negative consequences that our young can meet. And for far too long, the platforms have earned money on harassment and humiliation. We cannot accept that. With the DSA, we made an important step. We said that what is illegal offline is also illegal online, and we gave the platforms responsibility. But we're not quite there yet because it continues to happen. We find them, but not enough is happening. So we have to talk about stronger frameworks. That goes for the criminal area as well. I think we have to think about whether the platform should not be held responsible when we can see that time and again they do not do enough to protect our children and our young. We have to take our responsibility seriously. We have to make sure that something happens so that we can protect our.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Magoni.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Thank you, Commissioner. Cyberbullying isn't an exception nowadays. It is a daily presence in young people's lives. More and more people check or Google cyberbullying and how to protect themselves from. It is happening more and more, even in primary schools. But the most worrying data is that most victims don't seek help. Cyberbullying remains invisible, even when it is in people's daily lives. And it doesn't turn off when you turn off your screen. It is part of your identity, schools, homes. So the question is, how widespread is it? The question is, why aren't we managing to stop it? Because we act too late, because we don't prevent enough, and we tolerate online what we wouldn't tolerate offline. We need families and schools that are prepared. We need platforms that act and act quickly, because digital freedom without responsibility isn't freedom, it is abandonment.
Grazie, onorevole. Prego.
Thank you very much.
Grazie.
Thank you, Chair. Shut up, you stupid bitch. You are just a token diversity hire. What an insufferable and dull individual. You are a fucking traitor, Niverco, to the Irish people. These are just a handful of the comments left on my X account. When I report them to X and to Ireland's national media regulator, nothing happens. Women in politics are 27 times more likely to face online abuse than their male colleagues. These abuse and threats have happened to half of female parliamentarians. Abuse and threats like this are part of our daily life. Therefore, I am calling on the Commission to step up and introduce strict targeted criminal provisions. Jackie Fox stood before this very Parliament a while ago and spoke about her 21-year-old daughter who died by suicide after receiving a slew of horrific online abuse. This House has a duty to protect European women in the digital space, to protect our daughters, our sisters, our mothers. Come on, women. Together, we can do it.
Grazie, onorevole. Prego, onorevole.
Thank you very much. Mrs. van Sparentak.
Colleagues, no child or woman should ever have to go through what Coco had to go through. Let her suffering not be in vain. And today everyone here from left to right will commit to stop online harassment. But last night we could have banned all notifier AI tools and tools that generate child abuse in Europe. And then the Christian Democrats, Conservatives and PFE stalled negotiations on this topic for 8 hours, ending in no deal, because banning AI systems that generate images of your exposed breasts and exposed buttocks without your consent is, according to them, too much for companies. They would prefer only to ban AI generating female nipples or fully naked bumps. By being so overly specific, we risk arbitrary results and actually legitimize abuse. AI creating an image of you with a G-string or just covering nipples with stars would suddenly be a legal thing.
You aren't supporting a ban, you support a menu for abuse. I call on all right-wing politicians that have committed to end online harassment today, talk some sense into your colleagues, notifiers our abuse, and hopefully we can ban this form of cyberbullying for once and for all. Thank you.
Grazie onorevole, prego onorevole.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sarsalejos.
Thank you, President, Commissioner. Well, if we are having this debate today, it's because we do feel that neither the European Union or member states are providing the right responses, or at least are providing them in right time. Technology seems to be outpacing us, as if we were unable to address the reality of our children's digital lives. And yes, we need to take decisions. Let me put an example, because while I am confident on the positive outcome on the current negotiations with the Council on a permanent CSAM prevention regulation, the fact is that now, at this very moment, we lack a legal framework for allowing the detection of child sexual abuse material online. Yes, we need clear definitions, we need harmonization of criminal provisions, we need a stronger enforcement of EU rules. The digital space is increasingly challenging, to say the least, for children, for their integrity, for their mental health, for their education. And we should consider a whole range of measures. Most of them can be based on actual legal instruments. Enhanced risk assessment with a specific focus on minors. Specific mitigation measures including appropriate parental controls or effective age verification mechanisms. Detection measures, human content moderation, effective and accessible mechanisms ensure that swift action required when a cyberbullying situation or a CSAM material is identified or reported. If cyberbullying and CSAM, if grooming and sexual extortion are entering our homes and target our children, it is due to a great extent to a sense of impunity of perpetrators, and that must end. Thank you.
Mr. Zarzalejos, there is a blue card for you. Please, Madam Wisniewska, for 30 seconds.
I'm here. Dziękuję bardzo, pani.
Thank you very much, President. I am convinced that we are all concerned. I'm convinced that we are all concerned about the welfare of children. The fact that the regulation on protecting children didn't go through the Parliament is something that we all lament. But I wonder, sir, if you don't think we shouldn't effectively use the DSA in order to protect children.
Prego, onorevole Zarzalejos.
Mr. Zarzalejos.
Yes, once the interim regulation expired, the DSA is probably the only legal instrument that we can use, but it is insufficient. We need a specific regulation concerning the specific risks, threats, and the measures to protect minors. And that is what we are doing. But in the meantime, I think that we should consider measures to prevent any legal gap in the detection and reporting of child sexual abuse online.
Grazie, onorevole.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Benifei.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Commissioner, in Italy, 34% of teenagers have been the victims of cyberbullying. This is the product of platforms that make a profit on hate. We have to change course immediately. The Commission has said that Meta doesn't stop 13-year-old kids from using it, and we know what the impact is. They knew about this, but they chose not to act. Teenagers, LGBTQ, and minors are paying the highest price. AI has turned this into systematic violence. Just recently, in Acri, in Calabria, 200 minors saw their own images turn into sexual deepfakes. And this is just the beginning of what could become a real landslide and slippery slope. We have to make sure that we implement rules with real penalties and sanctions. We have to ban non-consensual nudifiers, and we have to invest in schools, psychological support, and the proper culture. Let us not waste any more time. Thank you very much, Mr. Torselli. In these last 3 seconds, somewhere in Europe, a child has received a message that is humiliating him or her in front of the others. He or she cannot delete it and cannot defend himself or herself because it's online. But online humiliation is never ending. You've all said it. 1 out of 6 adolescents report that they were buried online. And there's also I would say that given the situation, we need more school, more awareness raising, but also more family. It isn't enough to be scandalized when you hear about the most recent bully, when we're the ones who just come up with hate online. The government tried to bolster prevention. But now, at the moment, we need the courage to take the next step. We need true accountability, true rules, but without exploiting this, because if we want to fight against cyberbullying, we need pragmatism and not ideology. Thank you very much, Mrs. Henriksson.
Talman, kommissionär, nyligen lyssnade vi.
President, Commissioner, we heard from Jackie Fox in this chamber, and her emotive description of the terrible bullying and attacks on her daughter. Tragically, she then took her own life. Now that should have been a signal to all of us. Jackie's daughter is not the only one, and it shows that we as a society, we have failed. We have failed to protect our children and young people sufficiently in this digital world in which we now live. This House has to now take a step forwards and say enough is enough. We must demand that platforms do more. They bear a heavy responsibility, as do the perpetrators, of course. In the past, bullying was in the school playground. Now, bullying is coming home with children as well. We have to take that seriously, and we adults also have enough responsibility and must act.
Mr. Stoltenberg. Mrs. Stoltenberg.
Billions to create addictive and inescapable online worlds. Pennies to deal with the fallout of it. Tech companies have spent fortunes tweaking algorithms, targeting even more younger users, and creating the most eye-catching online worlds. But the moment their users are there, they are on their own. Unrestricted cyberbullying? Nothing to do with me, says Zuckerberg. Or a harassment epidemic? Sounds like a you problem, Musk would say. The result is serious. Deepfakes, sexual abuse, grooming, and online widespread violence. And this violence affects everyone, but women are targeted most. Especially young girls, politicians, journalists. Women are actively pushed out of the public debate, afraid of being abused. And these problems are not accidental. They are built into the system. Algorithms boost what polarizes, sexualizes, and it amplifies that what shocks. We must hold these platforms to account. It's them who must take the lead in bringing this harassment epidemic to an end. Thank you.
Grazie, onorevole. Prego, onorevole.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Glavak.
Hvala vam lijepa, kolegice I kolege.
Thank you, colleagues. You are disgusting. You are looking at me in a disgusting way. What kind of hair do you have? These are the statements why cyberbullying needs to be criminalized. These provisions are provisions only in a few member states, and it is not defined what cyberbullying is. Children in the European Union need to be equally protected, regardless of where they live. This is not a virtual problem, this is a real problem, and it is connected with depression, anxiety, and other disorders. This is why I call on the Commission that they don't stop with recommendation, but that they work for targeted legal provisions. In Ireland, we have now prison sanctions for perpetrators of cyberbullying. We know how many children are the victims. These are real lives. These are not only numbers. And violence does not have an ideology, but it does have consequences. And we have heard what these consequences are. And this is why we need a common, clear framework, because cyberbullying leaves a digital trace forever. We need to act now, and we need to criminalize cyberbullying. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Angel.
President, dear Commissioner, dear colleagues, one quick anonymous click for the aggressor, long-lasting consequences for the victim. Online spaces have become a fertile ground for harassment and cyberbullying, affecting especially children. Parents feel powerless. Children continue to suffer. Families are left alone to deal with tragedy. The European Union must respond and must do more. Children across our union deserve the same level of protection regardless where they live. That requires a coordinated and consistent European approach. And as Socialists and Democrats, we have welcomed the Commission's action plan seeking to build a common understanding of cyberbullying, improving reporting and strengthening prevention. But let us be clear, we already have strong instruments. The Digital Services Act, the AI Act give us means to act against harmful content and unsafe systems, but implementation remains patchy. Why does Europe still hesitate to hold platforms accountable, even when the well-being of our children is at stake? We call on the Commission and on the Member States to fully enforce existing rules and ensure that platforms take real responsibility. And we also want a streamlining of criminal law in the Union and in the Member States. This is about protection, dignity and safety, and our children deserve nothing less. Thank you.
Grazie, onorevole. Prego, onorevole Roglu.
Thank you very much. Mr. Eroglu.
Frau Vizepräsidentin.
Vice President, Commissioner. Commissioner, if parents are having to bury their children, something is going wrong in the European Union. It's not the right order. And it shouldn't be the case that the mother of a murdered daughter feels that she has to fight forever to explain here in the European Parliament what had happened to her daughter. Something has gone wrong in the European Union, Commissioner, and it's not acceptable that we are now starting to deal with this. In legal terms, the internet is not a public playground, and the internet is not a marketplace. On the internet, companies earn money, and those companies have a responsibility. It's not a free public space. Every second, money is being earned. And we don't just need one conference after another. We need a Commission president that really deals with these companies to protect our children. It's not acceptable that children are dying in the European Union. Act now and stop talking. Thank you.
Grazie, onorevole. Prego, onorevole Schilling.
Thank you very much. Schilling is next.
Liebe Kolleginnen und
Colleagues, today I'd like to speak for those voices that we can no longer hear, the voices of young people who are not living in playgrounds, but their lives are broken down into comments. And it's great that we're having yet another debate about how we can solve this. But dear EPP, you have the power to change the lives of these people. We're here today, and then we all leave the room, and we say how important that was. We didn't change anything. And we have the tools in our hands. You have the tools in your hands. Yesterday in the trilogue, and in the future, there will be many other issues coming up, for example, on the DSA. But at the end of the day, it's young people across Europe, and they count on you. They want you to finally take responsibility, the responsibility that you owe to them. There are so many people who have stood here and said, we owe this to our children, but we really do owe them. And instead of that, in Austria, the People's Party has decided that the NGOs that are actually dealing with this to support children, that those NGOs should be weakened and their budget should be cut. You should finally shoulder your responsibility and listen to the voices of those children who can no longer speak.
Grazie, onorevole. Prego, onorevole Adam.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Adamovich.
President, Commissioner, how many more children will have to take their own lives before we call cyber violence a crime? How many children will see their photos used by AI to create pornography? How many women will be blackmailed with the threat of publishing private photos? How many children are going to be dragged into dangerous games online? Cyber violence is keeping people awake at night and causing damage, and nobody can deal with it alone. And the content lasts forever online, and people don't want to continue living under these conditions. Photographs illegally distributed online have caused, for example, Coco to take her own life. We want we want a law against that sort of thing for the whole of the EU, and that's why I've drafted a resolution, and I call on all of you to vote in favour of it. Cyberbullying is taking lives, but the perpetrators are still enjoying impunity.
Grazie, onorevole. Prego, onorevole.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ross-Semper.
Grazie, Presidenta.
Thank you, President. Commissioner. Names can be deceiving. We call it cyberbullying, for example, as if the harm remained on the screen online, but that's not how it is. Online bullying continues after you switch off your phone. It continues with the child in their bedroom. It pursues the child on its way to school. It creates fear, anxiety. It creates a lack of self-esteem. And we need to say, that's enough. It's not acceptable that 1 in 6 children in the European Union say that they have suffered from cyberbullying. And we do have the tools at our disposal. We have the Digital Services Act, which is in force. Why are we not using it? Why are we not enforcing it in full? Why is it that there are huge, rich companies who are making money out of our attention and the attention of vulnerable people? Why don't we remove them from their websites? We need to confront this abuse with a law in our hands and continue to make progress in awareness raising and education, as is said in the report that we are drafting, because although the bullying is called digital, the consequences are profoundly real. Thank you.
Grazie, onorevole. Prego, onorevole.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Aguigorta Martinez.
Ya era hora de dar.
The time had come to take action and to make this an offence. A lot of people turned to me and said, can we not do something to stop this? So much news about non-consensual images shared on WhatsApp, images of women and children, because it's always women and children in our images that are circulating on the internet. And every time we hear about mental health issues, suicides or attempted suicide because of cyberbullying, we realize that there is irreparable damage. This kind of harm isn't allowed in the physical world, so it shouldn't be allowed in the digital world. Education, training, awareness raising are key. These are tools we have to harness to create a true culture of respect and responsibility. And all political parties and groups should set the example. What is also clear is that current legislation has loopholes, and we need criminal law frameworks that are harmonized so that cyberbullying and online harassment are treated as the serious crimes that they are, so we can make headway. Thank you.
Onorevole Walsh, prego.
Every day, like you, I read another story of a child harmed by the online world. Another statistic, another life changed. And when children are on platforms they're not supposed to be on, harm only increases. Today, the European Commission has preliminarily found that Meta may be in breach of the Digital Services Act for failing to properly prevent minors from accessing platforms like Facebook and Instagram. This absolutely matters, because when age safeguards fail, children are exposed earlier, longer and more intensely to environments where cyberbullying thrives. Algorithms amplify harmful content and abuse spreads faster than it can be contained. I'm proud that Ireland has taken action that targeted laws on cyberbullying. Since Coco's law was introduced, we've seen over 400 charges and summons issued. That shows progress. It shows accountability can work. But one country acting alone is simply not enough. We need an EU-wide legislation that holds both perpetrators and platforms accountable, real enforcement, clear rules and real consequences. We need to do this for the mother called Jackie Fox, and of course we owe it to Nicole Coco Fox. Thank you very, very much.
Grazie, onorevole. Prego, onorevole.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lopez Aguilar.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. Commissioner McAuliffe, cyberbullying no doubt affects all Europeans. It affects millions of people across the 27 member states. And it particularly hits vulnerable people, women, children, I'm sure. And it's not just something which moves us, it's something which should encourage us to act. And it can't just be about parental control, and it's not just about digital literacy, nor is it just about coordinating national strategies. We need to have a European-level response. And first and foremost, we need to deal with the big tech platforms and their unacceptable business models, because they are undermining fundamental rights that we really value. And we need to ensure that they comply with the Digital Services Act and all European legislation. We need to have exemplary penalties if they do not take down illegal content. But secondly, the Commission has come forward with an initiative to make cyberbullying a European crime. Clear definitions, common standards and common penalties applying to all European criminal codes, so that we can also deal in criminal legal terms with cyberbullying. It really is something which deserves to be described as a crime.
Grazie, onorevole. Faccio appello a tutti.
Thank you very much. Please respect your speaking time. Thank you very much. Mr. Arias Echeverría is next. Thank you very much, Madam President, Commissioner. The European measures against cyberbullying are not commensurate with the gravity of the situation. They do not rise to the occasion. The cyberbullying plan tries to clearly define the problem. We have to offer clear solutions that are decisive. Ireland has shown us the way, and Jackie Fox, Coco's mother's valiant speech and testimony encourages us to do something about this. I listened to her a few weeks ago, and we were all extremely moved in the chamber. It is clear that we're not doing enough. As was mentioned in the previous plenary, we want to continue the legacy of Coco's law. We need harmonization of criminal law. We need to impose obligations on platforms. We need penalties if the rules aren't respected. Cyberbullying knows no borders. Inaction is not a solution. We have to take action on a European level. Let us harness Jackie's example so that what happened to Coco never happens to anyone else.
Prego.
Thank you very much, Vice President Picerno. Thank you very much, President. Online harassment and cyberbullying have to lead to consequences. We mustn't think that because they're committed online, there shouldn't be consequences, because it has a huge impact on the lives of children, minorities, women, teenagers. We're talking about a huge impact. Sometimes the impact is dramatic, and the perpetrators need to be made aware of this. And perpetrators should not be given the possibility to hide behind the anonymity provided by the internet. Of course, we have made progress with the DSA, the AI Act, but these steps are not enough. More than anything, often there is a lack of implementation. So as we just said when we talked about online gender-based violence, there is an urgent need to come up with a clear European definition of cyberbullying. We also need clear prevention measures and clear punishment of these crimes. All of this has to be enshrined in EU treaties. We need prosecution across the EU. We know that the consequences of cyberbullying can be terrible. We're talking about terrible scars that have a huge impact on people's lives, and we're called upon to take action. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mrs. Doherty.
Thank you, President. I want to speak directly to anybody who has ever been abused or attacked online, and unfortunately there's far too many. But I want you to know that we see you, but we also clearly see the need to protect you. When I was a kid, when you got home, at least the bullying stopped. Now it follows you into your home, into your bedroom, into your pocket, into your thoughts. There's literally no escape from it. And the truth is, some of the people in this House don't want to admit, we all should want to see what's illegal offline, illegal online, full stop. Ireland didn't wait. After the tragic death of Coco Fox and the relentless courage of her mother, Jackie, who you all met last month, we acted and we brought in Coco's Law. We made it a crime to abuse, harass or exploit somebody online, and now there are real, tangible consequences. So you have to ask the Commission, why is Europe still dragging its feet? Because right now our laws are not keeping up. Platforms cannot keep profiting from abuse while pretending they're powerless to stop it. And we in Ireland have proven that this can be done. So the question now is, what's Europe waiting for? Thank you.
Grazie, onorevole. Prego, onorevole Cunha. Prego.
Mr. Cunha, please.
Obrigado, Sra. Presidente. O cyberbullying.
Thank you, President. Well, cyberbullying is something we're seeing increase right across the European Union. It's one of the most visible parts of a terrible digital crisis that's affecting our youngest citizens. We're seeing that particularly in the digital sphere, and that means that victims have nowhere to hide. They're bullied at home or at work, and then they're also bullied at home via their mobile phone. We need to provide a clear response here. The law in Ireland shows that it is possible to allocate criminal responsibility for bullying online and also to help victims. Now, the path from here is that we need to recognise that the internet is not somewhere where everything is allowed. What you do online must have consequences, but we can't only act on those who commit these crimes. Platforms have their share of responsibility as well. They can't continue to benefit from models that amplify abusive content. They need to act when they fail. They need to be held responsible when they fail to protect victims. We also need to prevent what's happening and protect people. We want to see the Commission moving forward. Thank you.
Kelly.
Mr. Kelly, please.
Thank you, President and Commissioner and colleagues.
Questions are posed in the shattered lives of those left behind. What did we do to deserve this? What could we have done to prevent it? Why us? When Jackie Fox's daughter, Nicola, was tragically taken from her, she turned these questions into a mission. She pushed, she marched, she fought, and through her strength and determination saw Coco's Law enacted in Ireland, which criminalised the vile cyberbullying which led to Nicola's death. In the 3 years since Coco's Law was enacted, there have been almost 100 prosecutions for cyberbullying in Ireland. Behind each of these prosecutions is a victim. There is a person, a family, an entire community who deserve justice. Coco's Law is a means to that end, and is already deterring would-be bullies from these cruel actions in the first place. I thank my EPP colleagues in particular who've enthusiastically championed the cause of making Coco's Law a European law. We must act now. We've seen the impact Coco's Law has had in Ireland. We must make Coco's Law a European law, and we must do so now.
I hope that we'll be able to pass this law soon with the support from Parliament here. This is something that Coco and her mother Jackie both deserve. Many thanks.
Grazie onorevole.
Thank you. That concludes this debate. Well, we now move on to the Catch the Eye procedure. We have 7 people signed up. We can take all those speakers, but colleagues, I would nevertheless ask you to stick to your speaking time. So, Mrs. Carberry, please, first.
Prego.
Thank you, Madam President. Imagine a child too frightened to walk into their classroom, too frightened to face someone abusing them online. Around 1 in 4 young people in Ireland experience it, and it goes beyond bullying. Last year, 1.2 million children across 11 countries reported being targeted by deepfake sexual abuse. These numbers are horrifying. And just this week, European police raised serious concerns about a growing online network, the COM, encouraging children as young as 7 and 8 to self-harm and to harm others. Clear action is needed urgently. In Ireland, Jackie Fox has led the way after her daughter Nicole died by suicide following sustained online bullying. Jackie turned unimaginable grief into action. Her campaign led to Coco's law criminalising severe online abuse and sharing of intimate images without consent. That same protection must now be extended across the entire EU. So, Commissioner, just as Jackie showed the determination in Ireland, Europe must now show the same resolve now. Thank you.
Grazie onorevole. Prego onorevole Della Pisa.
Thank you. Mrs. Della Pisa, carry on now, please.
Señorías. Ladies and gentlemen, the digital era gives opportunities but also risks. The way in which we communicate has changed. Online protection needs to be a priority, particularly for minors. Cyberbullying and online sexual harassment, we all see how necessary it is to protect children from these threats. We need to find solutions from different approaches. Support for families, limiting access to platforms, as well as the responsibility of young people, and anybody who commits these crimes should not go unpunished. We have techniques to do this, and we shouldn't make the mistake of giving that responsibility to organisations that don't act independently, and it could expose young people to more risks. So let's trust those who have competence for this, our forces of law enforcement bodies. And we have to respect privacy, of course. We want safety in all senses. Otherwise, this is not a solution. You're looking for an excuse to threaten other rights. Thank you.
Grazie onorevole. Prego onorevole Tinkinen.
Thank you. Mr. Tinkinen now, please.
Arvoisa puhemies, vuonna 1900...
Thank you very much indeed, President. 1984 is George Orwell's 80-year-old dystopian novel. And in the novel, every step and every thought of the citizens are followed by the state. Today, this has become a reality in the UK, where people are arrested for their contributions on social media. George Orwell should prove an example rather than a warning, rather than an example to follow. And I believe that EU measures to be taken across cyberbullying they're devastating phenomenon, but please do not use this as an excuse to launch new EU initiatives to promote the surveillance of online activity. The EU should be an economic union. Orwell's book must remain a fiction.
Onorevole Jovanovici, prego.
We have Mr. Jovanovici, please.
Mulțumesc. Vorbiți aici de copii care se sinucid pentru că...
Thank you very much. Well, we're talking about children who commit suicide here, children who went online. There are also perhaps children who wanted to take their lives, but were prevented from doing so for whatever reason. Now, there are also children in Ukraine who suffered. Children in Romania have suffered as a result of the war because they couldn't leave their homes at times. But the European Parliament and the Commission haven't really done anything to help these children. I mean, so many children are left without education, they're left illiterate, and that's because of your policies. I mean, you don't seem to worry when governments violate, children's and women's rights unless they're on your side.
Prego, onorevole Sokol.
Mr. Sokol now, please.
1 in 6 young people are victims of harassment online. Violence of digital platforms is expanding rapidly and leaves long-standing consequences, especially on young people and children. Despite the existing European legislation, cyberbullying is on the increase. Unfortunately, victims are not evenly protected. Safety should not depend on where one resides. At the same time, there are more and more complex forms of harassment, from sharing intimate content to challenges posed by AI. This requires a unified EU answer. We need to urgently act at the European level in order to implement the existing legislation, to implement the existing sanctions for cyberbullying, to restrict access of children to internet, and to invest more into preventing violence online. At the same time, awareness raising should be a key tool to fight against this problem. This is the right of every individual, irrespective of the country where they live. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Wisniewska. Now, please.
Thank you very much, President. ChatGPT was asked the following question: how can we destroy the young generation? The answer was very scary. You should give them smartphones and unlimited internet access, make them dependent on screens, and make them think that this is freedom. And this is not a hypothesis. This is not a hypothetical scenario. This is the reality, the everyday reality of millions of children. And this is the source of cyberbullying, internet dependency, and pressure on social media. These are elements of the same system. Those children live under constant pressure, which is depleting their mental health and leads them to a huge number of suicide attempts. You have been discussing this issue, then you go out of this room and you smile and you laugh. Every moment, every minute, in every place, young children are subjected to violence which breaks their hearts and souls, and they choose the ultimate road that they have at hand. If we're not effective in combating cyberbullying, this will go nowhere. We need to restore education to schools. We need to strengthen and shape the system of...
Thank you, Mr. Hetman.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Dear colleagues, we need to enforce the responsibility and make platforms accountable. We need to hold them accountable for contents that are published on such platforms. Otherwise, we will not be able to deal successfully with cyber violence. It is important to prosecute those who are using the violence online, but it's not enough, because the provider may not say, I'm giving you this tool, it's at your disposal, and I'm not responsible for what is happening. This is unacceptable. Plus, there are also the algorithms which are promoting aggressive contents. So my message is the operators, the platforms, need to be held accountable for the contents, for what is happening on such platforms. Otherwise, we will sadly keep witnessing such tragedies of young people, adolescents and children. Thank you.
Prego, Commissario Mikalev.
Commissioner Mikalev, please, the conclusions. you have the floor.
Thank you, President, and thank you to the members for this exchange. And it's quite clear for me and for whoever was part of this discussion that this is work focusing on saving lives. It is very clear also what our vision is in this respect. We know that globally and around the world, people are watching at us, people are watching what we do in relation to the digital world. And Europe will continue to set an example globally. Europe will be a place where every child, every young person, every woman, every person with a disability who is targeted, especially in the digital world, can grow in a safe environment. Europe is a place that will continue to be guided by values where people are protected, supported, and empowered to thrive in the digital world, where their fundamental rights are respected. But we also have to step up to make our tools work even better. Our focus as a Commission is to deliver concrete results. The action plan that we have presented in February is about protection and empowerment. We are equipping children, parents, educators, and communities with the tools that they need to prevent cyberbullying, to report it, and to respond effectively to it. We are also strengthening support systems so that no child is left behind when facing abuse. But success will depend on strong cooperation with and support from member states. Only by working together can we turn this ambition into reality. I very much welcome here the support of the European Parliament to uphold this priority. And before concluding, I would like to say a word about the issue of CSAM. The current gap is not where we want to be. We must move faster. What we face now, this gap, is affecting millions of people, millions of children, and thousands online. What pains me mostly is that this is a situation that was easily preventable. So now I would say that there is heightened responsibility on co-legislators to move with urgency and to deliver a long-term solution. My final message is to people, to especially young people, and I see young people also who are in this chamber right now, who are going through a tough time, both in digital environments but also in physical ones. Also to parents who feel lost, or to anyone who is listening to this exchange and wants more information. My message to you is speak up, help is available, contact a safer internet center, ask for support, and most importantly, you are not alone. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kommissar. Vielen Dank für diese.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, colleagues. There are 7 motions for resolution that have been tabled. This concludes that debate, and the vote takes place tomorrow. The next item on the agenda is the Council and Commission statements on the need to combat anti-Semitism and protect Jewish life in Europe following the recent attacks against the Jewish community in the Netherlands and Belgium. Welcome, Commissioner Kubilius. Let me give the floor to Minister Rauna for the Council to kick off the debate.
Madam President, honourable members, Commissioner, allow me to commence by unequivocally condemning